Thank you very much, Massimo. It's a great pleasure to be here today. Thank you for the invitation. This is a presentation about a real-life experience or example of a scientific process where we try to articulate several key actors and create collective action that create a movement, an alternative discourse that let us start or trigger a transformation in a specific sector. In this case was the energy sector. And we developed for that a methodology, a participatory research methodology that helped us to guide a group of multi-sectoral actors to engage in a production of an alternative discourse and start to think about strategies to change the local policy. So this is the example of Ecuador. As we all know, we are living plenty of different crises, social crisis, environmental crisis, and economic crisis, and all of these crises are connected to, according to our assumptions, to one issue, that is the way we are making decisions. So governance processes have a big responsibility in how we centralize this decision-making processes, and the outcome of this decision-making would be decisions that benefit only a few and not the whole population, and of course not the environment. So in this case, we were analyzing which actors and can we engage in a certain process of a socio-technical system, such as the energy system, where, as you know, energy is a very important process in the societal development, since energy is the raw material for all, I would say, all of the societal activities. So in this case, our main assumption was that civil society is marginalized of these decision-making processes. And in time, we have been creating these networks of decision-making that are partly composed by state actors, but also market actors, because in the case of Ecuador, and as well in other countries in Latin America, the energy sector has been nationalized and privatized for several times. So we have been going from privatization to nationalization, and through this process of going back and forward, we have been creating, merging these networks of actors, these policy networks, which are mainly responsible of taking these, I would say, unsustainable decisions along the years. So the thing is that we have been discussing, or the main discussion is either if we go to the left or to the right. But the problem is that in both cases in our country, if the government is a more or right-oriented or neoliberal government, then we'll end up in oligopolies of decision-making. So the decision-making is centralized by a few private incumbents or vested interests. And in the other hand, when we had these left-oriented governments, in the opposite, they created a centralized state monopoly of decision-making. So the argument here is that it is not the question if it is left or right, but if it is centralized or decentralized. So in this case, we are looking for a more collaborative, distributed governance model where we can decentralize decision-making, but also infrastructure, investments, and other characteristics of the energy sector. So by saying that, we created a platform where we engage these several actors, state actors, market actors, and also civil society, in academia as well, which is not drawing this graph, in order to pursue this scientific guided dialogue among the actors and to test if what would happen if the decision-making process includes other values, includes other perspectives, what is the outcome of these vision scenarios and strategies that we want to implement. So we simulated a political arena it was a real social experiment, and we brought the decision makers to this arena, this transition arena, that we call it, and we simulated this process in order to see what is the outcome, which will be the visions, the regulatory frameworks, the preferable scenarios. And so we were based on different scientific approaches, mainly the transition management cycle, which the idea is to engage and articulate these multi-sectoral actors in producing visions or imaginaries about the future, and pursue or foster the conformation of joint agendas and start to experiment with these joint projects among different actors. The idea is to break with this formal institutionality and start to create informal institutional networks that could be more stable in contexts like Latin America, where our democracies are illiberal or unstable. But these informal institutional networks, they could last longer since they don't depend of the changes, the political changes. So the idea was to strongly connect the academia, so scientific scientists, scientific actors with their analytic and abstract knowledge, with the practitioners or decision makers from different sectors with their intuitive and experiential knowledge, in order to integrate and assemble knowledge about the problems, the future scenarios, and the strategies to transform the sector towards a more sustainable system. So that was the process. We then conformed this team, this transdisciplinary research team, where we engage in this scientific guided dialogue and produce this knowledge that then was and it still is useful for the societal practice and also for the scientific practice. So the idea was to have this collective unit that was mainly producing knowledge about the problems, so the system knowledge, about the visions, the target knowledge, and about the strategies of transforming, and also build certain capacities. And when we say capacity building here, we mean to the collective capacities you can build in a group of people that have different languages and different understandings of the reality. So what is important here is that these different actors, they live in different worlds, basically in different communities, and they should start to communicate among each other by also understanding their perspectives, their language, their worldviews. And this is done by stimulating some collective reflection capacity. So the ability for this collective group of very diverse individuals to reflect, but also to anticipate, like to create imaginaries about the future. So can we collectively develop or plan scenarios, and how can we integrate the perspectives from everybody in this process? So this was combined also with some political approaches to see how can we then use this information or these narratives we are developing with these actors in a policy window. So how can they use these alternative discourses in the right moment? Because it is not easy in such a context where we have autocracies then to introduce these discourses. So we were looking for the right moments and trying to develop such a process of developing knowledge narratives and taking advantage of windows of opportunities. So we developed this framework, which is the combination of these policy entrepreneurs, which are the change agents of actors that we invited to the process, a certain arena, like the concrete boundaries and the methods of the transdisciplinary arena, and certain methods to produce knowledge or reflexivity in order to produce this transformative knowledge and use it in the window of opportunity. And we did that by asking mainly three questions. So the first question was aimed to basically understand the particular context within which the participants act. So what is the context, how they act, what is the ability of this group to produce certain knowledge and strategies, and what is the potential of these actors after that to create a network, a coalition that could last longer. So maybe that was the most difficult question to answer, the institutionality, the post-event institutionality. So I will go a bit faster since I don't have much time, but this is basically a graph that can summarize what we did. So we identified these actors, we did some ex-ante interviews, and then we produced this knowledge, we analyzed the process, the knowledge, and the potential of these actors to continue in a coalition, in a group, in a community of purpose, so that they can continue influencing the policy change. So this is basically what we did. We engaged these high-level decision makers in a dialogue to produce knowledge about transformative strategies, to build certain capacities, and to create these supportive networks that could, in a long run, produce these social learning loops and sectorial change. So I will jump here a bit, and we test this methodology in Ecuador and Peru in the energy sector with the decision makers, and the contributions were very interesting, and they are still are there they evolved in other initiatives, in other initiatives. So we had some results of societal practice, which were, we had like we built a new discourse with a vision, like defining the problems and the strategies to transform the energy sector. But also we managed to build this community based on trust, based on some identity and shared values. And in the other hand, we developed a methodological process to analyze energy transition, to foster basically participatory research that could also support the policy change in certain countries. So these are the scientific practice contributions, basically about the process of engaging the stakeholders, about the knowledge we generated, and about the potential of continue strengthening these networks. And some societal, of course, practice contributions which were these alternative discourses, these cross-sectoral partnerships we managed to generate, and this precedent that with this type of methodologies or transdisciplinary research methods, we can eventually or influence policy change. So the outlook is interesting because this is way more complicated to transform the energy system. But what we have seen is that we managed to introduce this discourse in different communities, and they are even using this knowledge and inputs for other processes of activism, other processes of collective action that still are running at the moment. Thank you very much.